Again, and today I'm going to be showing how to make a hot giardiniera. This blend of vegetables, giardiniera means garden in Italian. So this dish was pretty much done by Italian immigrants that came to Chicago. It was made very famous. So when you guys come to Chicago, make sure you guys try the famous Italian beef with giardiniera peppers. Maybe you don't want to come now because it's very cold over here, but feel free to join us. And today, like I said, I'm going to make this blend of vegetables, and I'm going to start by cutting up some vegetables. I went ahead and chopped the onions because they make me cry. And I don't want to be crying on camera, so I diced the onions already, about one medium-sized onion. Then I'm going to start with some beautiful red peppers that I have here. And this is a good way to practice your knife skills. So make sure that you guys, if you try this, and also if you guys, those of you that have nice vegetables at home, you grow a garden, this is a good way to use them. You can, make them and use them later on. They will stay, in the jar for quite a while. So since we have vinegar in there, it's going to help them, preserve the vegetables. And you can make them, hot or mild, or just, you can even leave the peppers off, like the hot peppers I'm going to put in there. But we're going to get to that in a second. We want to dice our red peppers. Make them small dice. And like I said, this is a good way to practice your knife skills. Also, you that want to get better at. And also, it's a nice way to use up if you grow vegetables in your garden. You know what to do with them. And, they go really well with some, like I said, beef sandwich, even an Italian sausage sandwich, or even in a burger. This, or you can use them in an antipasto platter. And I'm sure some of you probably had this before, but like I said, if you don't know the story behind, this were, invented here in Chicago, So we're really famous for this. And you can find them at the store. You can get a mild or hot. But today you're going to be able to make your own. Once we're done here making this, you're going to be, on your way to make your own hot giardiniera peppers. And feel free to ask questions. I like when you guys ask questions. This is what's going to take the longest to, get your stuff ready. But again, I'm going to try to make it quick and show you the process of making this. You're going to be using about, you could use a big, amount, but, I'm going to be using about 2 red peppers, 1 big green pepper, some carrots, cauliflower, some celery. And I'm using serrano peppers today. You can also use jalapenos, whatever you like, but I chose serrano peppers this morning. Got my red pepper here. I'm going to do one of my green peppers. It's pretty big, so I'm just going to use 1. The recipe calls for 2, but since it's really big, also you're going to see the recipe along with the video later on, so you can go and make this too. You want to make sure you take all this white membrane off the peppers, because they tend to be a little bitter when you put them in there too, so you don't want that. See? Like I said before, you can also make them without any hot peppers. If you guys don't like heat, you can just use regular vegetables, like the bell peppers, the olives, carrots, celery, and if you want to use very little peppers, just a little heat, you can do that too. And it's going to be something that you guys are going to be able to use in a lot of dishes. Okay. See, it's going pretty quick here. And we're gonna, put them in the brine. I'm gonna use some salt water to put them and soak them overnight. I did a batch last night, so I'm gonna really show you the whole process from beginning to end. I got some celery here. One stalk of celery from my recipe. Okay. I got one carrot. If they're too small like this, you don't have to like make them, planks. Just cut them in half, because it's gonna be really hard to, square them off, and cut them into like half moons or little rounds. These two you can just cut in half. Sometimes it's hard to get really big carrots at the store. And at the restaurant we get is that they're really different. They're packed different. When you work in the restaurant, you get this huge carrots, but the stores, I know a lot of students complain because they have a hard time finding big carrots, and like you saw the little tiny ones, it's going to be really hard to do into planks. This one's a little bigger, so we can do that. And you can chop these ends too. You don't want to, you want to use them, you can don't waste them. Cut them a little bigger. See? So, we try to minimize waste every time we can when we're in the restaurant, and you guys have to start practice this. Okay. Now I'm gonna cut my serrano peppers, and if you guys wanna, a good way to pick for peppers, how do you know which ones are the hotter ones? Well, there's two different ways. If you can see, I don't know if you can tell in camera, this is a little lighter. This is like dark green. Well, the ones that are lighter peppers, they're not as hot. So when you go looking for the peppers at the store, if you want them really hot, try to get the darker ones. Also, they have like little cracks on the skin. They look like little white cracks. That means they're like much hotter, which they were in the plant longer. They ripe a little more, so they're hotter than this light one. So you can also, there's a good way to kind of cut down the heat. Pick the ones that are like, not as dark green. They're a little less hot. So that's how you can, find out which ones are, hotter. This I'm just gonna cut in little wheels, little rounds. And if you guys want to use gloves, feel free. I don't mind my hands like this because I'm just going to be careful. But, you don't want to cut peppers and then go rub your face or touch your eyes. It's really going to hurt. So if you do it at home, feel free to wear gloves too. That way you kind of protect your hands from the heat. Okay. I'm using about like 8 serrano peppers. You can use less. You could just use one, or depends how you want them. I want them kind of spicy today, so I'm gonna use 8 of them. And I can smell them. They're pretty hot. Okay. One more here. I believe we have a question for one of our students.
When choosing jalapeno peppers, does the same description work, with darker color being hotter?
The question was, if you choose jalapeno peppers, will the same description work? Yes, it does. Pretty much for all peppers, like all the green, not like bell peppers, but jalapeno peppers, they also get like dark green and they get little cracks on the outside, little white cracks. That's how you can tell. Also poblano peppers, if you ever do poblano peppers, there's the same way too. Like there's poblano peppers, the ones we use for like stock peppers. They're like, they get real dark green, which means they have much more flavor, which they were like left longer in the plant to ripe. And the same thing goes with all the hot peppers and the jalapenos as well. So I'm gonna pick the florets off my cauliflower here. Got my paring knife here. Make it easy. Okay. Use about 1 cup or half a cup. You can use as much as you want. Done. You can also use the stems. I'm going to put them to the side and cut them up a little bit. smaller. Okay. There you go. This, I'm gonna cut them. So I'm not gonna waste anything. They're gonna be nice and crunchy. Now that we have all our vegetables cut up here, we have to like soak them in salt water. So I got some pickling salt. You don't have to use pickling salt. This is very pure salt. You will see when I add some water, it's gonna be nice and clear, which is done for pickling. But you can use regular salt if you like. We just want to cover the vegetables with the salt water solution. I'm using about like a quarter of a cup of salt, and then we're going to refrigerate them overnight. Okay. It looks kind of cloudy because of the bubbles, but once it settles down, it becomes really clear. Okay, we're going to add a little more just to cover our vegetables. There we go. As you can see now, have a nice blend. And these you want to cover and put them in the fridge overnight. So that way they get the flavor from the salt. And also going to help to like dehydrate the vegetables a little bit because salt attracts water. So they're going to be nice and they're going to take some of the water away from the vegetables so we can marinate them tomorrow morning. And I'm going to put this away. And like I told you before, I made some vegetables last night. I prepared this. And this is what they look like. Now we're going to drain them and rinse them off a little bit so they're not too salty. And then we're going to make, a marinate to marinate them and put them away so we can use them later on. So we're going to drain all this water. I marinate them all overnight, the salt water. I'm going to rinse them off a little bit with some cold water. We have a question for one of our students.
Someone's asking about sea salt and asking if it's saltier than regular salt.
Okay, if somebody wants to know if they can use sea salt or regular salt for this, you can use sea salt as well. I use some Canon salt because it's what I have, but you can also use regular sea salt, or regular salt or sea salt as well. And this is what they're gonna look like once I drain them. They look a little wilted because the salt kind of makes them wilted. They take some of the moisture away from the vegetable, which is not crispy anymore. And the onions are kind of a little soft. But then once we made marinade with the vinegar, the vinegar is going to help in two ways. One is going to maintain the color of the vegetables. It works fun because you're going to see once you marinate them, the green vegetables are going to lose the color a little bit, but the red peppers and the carrots and the cauliflower are going to be nice and bright. So it kind of keeps their color. Also, it's going to make them nice and crisp. So this is how it's going to work. And now we're going to mix our seasonings. I got some oregano here, some pepper flakes, some black pepper. I got some chopped garlic that I'm gonna add some of the white vinegar and my olive oil. We have a question with one of the students over here. What was the proportion of salt to water? Okay, I use about half a cup of salt to marinate the vegetables. So you just want to, I use probably 2 quarts of water. You just want to cover the vegetables with the liquid. So I probably use 2 quarts and half a cup of salt. Now we're going to combine our spices with the vinegar and oil. This is going to be our marinade. Also, I got over here some chopped olives. I got some of the canned olives. They're like stuffed with pimentos. If you don't want to get them stuffed, you can get just the regular olives and you want to chop them up. I'm going to add it to the end because this is already, and marinated. You don't want to, marinate them anymore. They're pretty salty already, so I just left them like that. Now I'm going to put back my vegetables in the bowl. We're going to add the olives. I think we have another question from one of the students over here.
What about using white wine vinegar?
What about using white wine vinegar? You can use white wine vinegar, but I just use, the question was, what if you want to use white wine vinegar? You can, vinegars are pretty much, an acid, but for this recipe, I just use it regular white wine vinegar, which is, cheaper. Vinegar is pretty cheap anyways. Now we're going to mix this very nice. We're going to add this to our vegetable blend here. And at this point, you don't want to add any more salt because these vegetables are really salty already from being soaked in the salt water overnight. You just want to, mix the vegetables with the marinade really well. And you're going to refrigerate them, a couple days before you use them. That way all the flavors come together. And this is where you're going to, this is going to look really nice. You're going to see more liquid, like the next day, it's going to draw some liquid from the vegetables, and you're going to see a lot more mixed with the oil and vinegar. Now, right now, it looks pretty dry, but tomorrow morning, you're going to see there's a lot of liquid with the vegetables, which is good. Do you guys have any more questions for me right now? And you guys can do this anytime. So it's really a two-step process. You do the vegetables one day, you soak them in the salt water overnight, and next morning you just finish putting it together, which is really nice. A lot of recipes they're done in 2-3 steps. So it's kind of nice that it's done this way, and you're able to use your vegetables. If you grow a garden at home, that's a good way to preserve the vegetables. You don't have to use them fresh. Once you can them like this, you can put them in the jar and keep them for a long time, because they will keep for a while, because they have the vinegar. It's going to help preserve the vegetables for quite a long time. So you can refrigerate them, and they'll be even longer. So you can use them to make a wonderful beef sandwich or whatever you want to use them in, and they make a great treat. So I want to thank you for being here with this morning, and I will see you next week with another interesting topic. Thank you and have a nice day.